Picture this. A sleepy coastal town so quaint it could double as the backdrop for a low-budget rom-com, where the biggest scandal is a seagull snatching a tourist's overpriced lobster roll. That's my home, a place where time moves slower than a sunburned family paddling a rented kayak. I'm Jake, 38, proud owner of Sunset Marina Rentals, a humble operation where I rent pontoon boats, fishing rigs, and a couple of speedboats to folks chasing that authentic coastal vibe, without the hassle of actually owning a vessel. It's a good gig, keeps me on the water, pays for my coffee addiction, and lets me avoid cubicles. For 8 years, my biggest headache was a tourist who thought full throttle meant aim for the dock. Then Karen Pemberton rolled into town, and my life became a Reddit thread waiting to happen. Karen, 52, freshly divorced, and armed with a settlement check big enough to buy her a waterfront McMansion, arrived like a hurricane in a captain's hat. Her house, a glass and steel monstrosity, looked like it was designed by someone who Googled modern beach home and clicked the first image. It came with a private dock, which Karen seemed to think granted her divine authority over the entire bay. In her 3 months here, she'd already terrorized the city council with complaints about excessive boat noise, read. Seagulls squawking, water pollution, read. Seaweed existing, and unsafe maritime activities, read. People fishing like normal humans. She was the kind of person who'd report a kid's lemonade stand for lacking a health permit. My first run-in with Karen was on a muggy Tuesday in July. I was elbow-deep in a pontoon boat's engine, sweating through my t-shirt, when I heard the unmistakable click-clack of high heels on the dock. I looked up to see Karen, dressed like she'd raided a yacht club's gift shop. White pants, navy blazer, and a captain's hat so shiny it could signal passing ships. She clutched a folder thick enough to choke a lawyer, her lips pursed like she'd just tasted sour milk. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that makes you want to check your life choices. "Are you the person responsible for these vessels?" She waved at my boats like they were a pile of rusty shopping carts. I wiped grease off my hands and stood up, forcing a smile. "That'd be me. Jake, Sunset Marina Rentals. Can I help you?" "Oh, I certainly hope so," she said, flipping open her folder with the flair of a prosecutor on a courtroom drama. "I've been documenting several violations and safety concerns regarding your operation." She began reading from a handwritten list that could have doubled as a novel manuscript. Boats parked in an aesthetically displeasing manner, excessive rope usage, and, my personal favorite, failure to maintain proper maritime atmosphere. I blinked, wondering if I'd missed the part where I signed up to run a nautical art gallery. "Sorry, Karen, but what's a proper maritime atmosphere?" "You know what I mean," she snapped, waving her hand like she was dismissing a servant. "This is supposed to be a classy marina, not some boat parking lot for riffraff." Riffraff. She meant the families with kids who dared to laugh while fishing, or the couple snapping selfies on my pontoons. I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of patience I had left. "Ma'am, my boats are fully permitted, regularly inspected, and insured up to my eyeballs. If you've got specific safety concerns, I'm happy to address them." "Safety concerns?" Her eyes gleamed like a shark spotting a wounded seal. "Oh, I have plenty. These boats are clearly not being used by qualified mariners. They're rental boats, Karen. For tourists. They're designed for people who want to float and sip margaritas, not navigate the Bermuda Triangle." "Exactly my point," she said, jabbing a manicured finger at me. "You're putting dangerous equipment in the hands of amateurs." I should have seen it then. The glint in her eye, the way her captain's hat tilted like she was auditioning for a villain role. This wasn't just a complaint. This was a declaration of war. But I was naive, thinking I could reason with someone who probably argued with her GPS about the fastest route to Crazy Town. "Look," I said, "I get that you're new here, but I've been running this business for 8 years. I give safety briefings, provide life jackets, and haven't had a single serious incident." Karen's smile was the kind that makes your skin crawl, like a cat eyeing a caged canary. "We'll see about that," she said, snapping her folder shut and strutting away, her heels echoing like warning shots. I stood there, engine wrench in hand, with the sinking feeling I'd just been targeted by a one-woman HOA with a nautical fetish. Little did I know, this was just the opening act in Karen's grand maritime crusade. She wasn't here to complain. She was here to conquer. And I, Jake, the guy who just wanted to rent boats and enjoy the sunset, was about to become her personal Moby Dick. If dealing with Karen Pemberton's dockside ambush in July was like stepping on a Lego, the weeks that followed were like wading through a kiddie pool filled with them. After our charming first meeting, where she accused my boats of ruining her imaginary yacht club fantasy, Karen didn't just back off. Oh no, she doubled down like a gambler who thinks one more hand will win back their house. What started as a single Karen sighting turned into a full-blown bureaucratic siege, and I, Jake, the guy who just wanted to rent pontoons to sunburn tourists, was suddenly starring in a Kafka novel with nautical vibes. Karen, it turned out, had a knack for weaponizing paperwork. I'm talking Olympic-level red tape jiu-jitsu. Her first move was noise complaints. Apparently, my boat's engines were violating some obscure ordinance by being unnecessarily loud. Never mind that they were standard marine engines, muffled to meet every regulation known to man. Karen had invested in a decibel meter, probably ordered it express from the Annoy Your Neighbors catalog, and was camped out on her private dock, measuring sound levels like she was auditioning for a Mythbusters episode. She'd wave that thing around like a wizard's wand, scribbling numbers in her ever-present notebook, her captain's hat perched at a Johnny angle. The complaints rolled in faster than seagulls on a dropped French fry. City Hall, the county board, the harbor master's office. Karen was filing grievances with anyone who'd pick up a phone. Each one meant a visit from some tired official who'd show up at my Marina, clipboard in hand, looking like they'd rather be auditing a landfill. Jake, said one inspector, a guy named Carl who smelled faintly of regret and tuna, we gotta check your engines. Lady says they're louder than a rock concert. I'd fire up the boats, he'd nod, check a box, and leave, muttering about that woman with the hat. I started keeping a coffee pot just for these visits. By week 2, I was on a first-name basis with half the county's regulatory staff. But noise was just Karen's warm-up act. Next came the environmental crusade. One day, she discovered that boats, shocker, sometimes leave tiny oil sheens on the water. To Karen, this was like finding proof I was running an offshore drilling rig in her backyard. She started photographing every rainbow glimmer near my boats, labeling them ongoing pollution events in her increasingly unhinged complaint letters. I found one of her photos taped to my office door, annotated with red marker. Ecological disaster courtesy of Sunset Marina Rentals. It looked like a crime scene photo from a detective show, except the victim was a puddle. The harbor master, Bob, a grizzled guy who'd seen every kind of marina drama in his 20 years, was losing his patience. Over coffee at the dockside diner, our new ritual thanks to Karen, he slammed his mug down hard enough to slosh decaf on the table. Jake, I've dealt with drunks, smugglers, even that guy who tried to live on a raft made of pool noodles. But this woman? She's a new species. She's filed more complaints in a month than I've seen in a decade. What's her endgame? I asked, stirring sugar into my third cup. Does she want me to switch to rowboats? Bob sighed, rubbing his temples. She's got to be in her bonnet about property values. Thinks your boats make the bay look like a Walmart parking lot. So what do I do? Keep your nose clean. Follow every rule. She'll get bored eventually and find someone else to torture. Bob, bless his optimistic heart, was dead wrong. Karen wasn't getting bored. She was getting creative. Her next move was to crash city council meetings, armed with PowerPoint presentations that could have doubled as psychological warfare. I snuck into one meeting, hiding in the back like a fugitive, and watched her unveil a 40-slide masterpiece titled The Maritime Menace, Sunset Marina's Threat to Our Community. She had photos of my boats with arrows pointing to violations like unsightly life jackets and excessive wake production. One slide claimed my pontoons were attracting undesirable elements, complete with a blurry photo of a family eating sandwiches on the water. The horror. These so-called rental boats, Karen declared, clicking her laser pointer like she was firing a sniper rifle, are a clear and present danger to our pristine waterways. They're piloted by untrained yahoos with no respect for safety or the environment. Councilman Peterson, a 90-year-old legend who'd survived 2 wars and 1 term as mayor, leaned into his mic with the patience of a man who'd heard it all. "Ma'am, do you have any actual incidents to report? A collision? A spill?" Karen's face twitched like she'd been asked to solve calculus in her head. I shouldn't have to wait for a disaster to act. Prevention is the key. But has anything happened? Peterson pressed, his voice like gravel. "That's not the point." Karen snapped, her voice hitting a pitch that made the room's fluorescent lights flicker. Something could happen. The council, to their credit, told her to take a hike. Politely, of course. My business was legal, licensed, and incident-free. But Karen didn't slink away defeated. No, her eyes sparkled with the manic energy of someone who'd just found their life's purpose, making my existence a living hell. As she packed up her projector, she shot me a look across the room, a look that said, "This isn't over, boat boy." I drove back to the Marina that night, the council meeting replaying in my head like a bad movie. The bay was calm, the moon glinting off the water, my boats bobbing gently in their slips. For a moment, I thought maybe Bob was right. Maybe Karen would move on to harassing the ice cream truck guy or the seagulls. But deep down, I knew better. Karen wasn't just a complainer. She was a predator, and I was her prey. The only question was how much crazier this was going to get before she either won or self-destructed. Spoiler alert, she was about to take crazy to a whole new level. By August, Karen Pemberton had turned harassing my boat rental business into a performance art piece worthy of a TED Talk titled, "How to Be a Menace Without Breaking a Sweat." After her failed city council crusade, where she tried to convince our town that my pontoon boats were the maritime equivalent of a zombie apocalypse, Karen didn't retreat. No, she upgraded her game from bureaucratic warfare to something straight out of a low-budget spy thriller. I'm Jake, the guy just trying to rent fishing boats to tourists, and I was now living in a world where my marina felt like the set of a dystopian reality show starring a woman in a captain's hat with way too much time on her hands. Karen's new obsession was surveillance. I'm not talking about casually glancing at my boats from her waterfront McMansion. Oh no, she'd set up what can only be described as a command center on her deck, complete with binoculars that looked like they could spot a barnacle on Neptune, a camera with a telephoto lens longer than my arm, and a notebook thicker than a phone book. She'd sit there for hours, scribbling like a conspiracy theorist mapping out alien landing sites, her captain's hat tilted like she was ready to brief MI6. Every boat that left my dock was apparently a potential crime scene in her mind, and she was the self-appointed Sherlock of the bay. I first caught wind of her new hobby when Mrs. Chun, a sweet retiree who rented my pontoon boat every Sunday to fish with her grandkids, called me in a panic. "Jake," she said, her voice shaking like she'd just seen a shark, "there's a woman with binoculars taking pictures of us. She's yelling questions about our boating experience from her deck." "Mrs. Chun, that's just Karen," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. "She's enthusiastic about safety." "Enthusiastic?" She told my grandson he was operating a vessel without proper maritime certification while he was eating a sandwich on a tied-up boat. "He's 12, Jake." I apologized profusely, promising to handle it, but the damage was done. Mrs. Chun canceled her rental for the next week, saying she didn't want her grandkids feeling like they're in a prison yard. I couldn't blame her. Karen's deck had become a one-woman NSA outpost, and her binoculars were making my customers feel like they were auditioning for a role in Enemy of the State. I decided to confront her. Big mistake. I marched up to her waterfront palace, where she was perched behind her surveillance setup like a villain in a Bond film. Charts were spread across a table, pinned with photos of my boats annotated with red Sharpie. Improper life jacket placement, suspicious wake patterns, potential smuggling activity. That one was a photo of a family with a cooler full of soda. She even had a whiteboard with a timeline of my marina's infractions. It was like she was preparing to testify at The Hague. "Karen," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She lowered her binoculars with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who knew they held all the power. I'm busy, Jake. Documenting safety violations. You're scaring my customers, I said, gesturing to her setup. You're taking photos, yelling at kids, and acting like you're running a sting operation. I'm conducting a maritime safety audit, she replied, adjusting her captain's hat. It's my civic duty. Then she flashed a badge. Yes, a badge that looked like it came from a cereal box. I'm a certified marine safety observer with the International Marine Safety Organization. I squinted at the badge, which had her name in Comic Sans and a logo that looked suspiciously like clip art. Karen, that's not a real thing. And you're not a real inspector. I'm a concerned citizen, she shot back. And these boats are a public hazard. You followed the Morrison family around the marina yesterday for an hour, asking about their maritime intentions. You're not protecting anyone. You're creeping people out. She stood up, clutching her notebook like it was the Constitution. I discovered they had no emergency radio, no flare gun, and no knowledge of international distress signals. They're a disaster waiting to happen. They were fishing, Karen, in 4 feet of water. They don't need a flare gun to catch trout. Depth is irrelevant, she snapped, her voice hitting a pitch that could summon dolphins. Water is water, Jake. The ocean doesn't care if you're in a bay or the Bermuda Triangle. I tried reasoning with her, which was like trying to negotiate with a seagull over a French fry. Karen, you're hurting my business. These are tourists trying to enjoy their vacation, not pirates planning a raid. Vacation? She said the word like I'd suggested hosting a rave in a cemetery. The ocean is not a playground. It's a dangerous, unpredictable force that demands respect. It's a bay, Karen. The biggest danger is someone dropping their sunglasses overboard. Her eyes narrowed, and I swear I saw her mentally add me to her whiteboard under enemies of maritime safety. You'll see, Jake, she said, turning back to her binoculars. When disaster strikes, you'll wish you'd listened to me. I walked away, the knot in my stomach tightening. Karen wasn't just annoying, she was relentless. Her surveillance campaign was starting to hit my bottom line. Customers were canceling bookings, whispering about that creepy lady with the camera. One guy, a dad from Ohio, told me he felt like he was being stalked by a nautical paparazzi. Another couple said they'd rather fish from the pier than deal with Karen's interrogations about their boating credentials. My marina, once a haven for laid-back summer fun, was turning into a battleground, and Karen was winning by sheer force of weirdness. I went to Bob, the harbor master, hoping for some kind of lifeline. She's not breaking any laws, he said, sipping coffee and looking like he'd aged a decade in a month. She's just aggressively eccentric. The police can't do much unless she physically trespasses or threatens someone. She's scaring away my customers, I said. That's gotta count as interference or something. File a harassment complaint, Bob suggested, but good luck proving it. She's got that badge and her whole safety inspector shtick. It's bizarre, but it's not illegal. I installed security cameras around the marina, hoping to catch her doing something actionable, but Karen was slippery. She'd shifted her inspections to daylight hours, strutting down the dock with her clipboard, taking notes like she was grading my boats on a curve. Tourists started avoiding eye contact, hurrying past her like she was handing out subpoenas. My revenue was taking a nosedive, and I was starting to wonder if I'd have to sell a kidney to keep the business afloat. As I locked up the marina one evening, the sun dipping below the horizon and casting an orange glow over the bay, I caught sight of Karen's silhouette on her deck, binoculars glinting in the twilight. She was still watching, still plotting, still convinced she was the bay's last line of defense against my reckless pontoon boats. The tension was building, and I knew this was far from over. Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a force of nature, and I was about to learn just how far she'd go to enforce her imaginary authority. By mid-September, I, Jake, the beleaguered owner of Sunset Marina Rentals, was starting to think Karen Pemberton wasn't just a thorn in my side. She was a whole cactus. Her surveillance operation had already turned my marina into a no-fun zone, with tourists dodging her binoculars like they were ducking a sniper. But I still clung to the naive hope that she'd eventually tire herself out. Maybe trade her captain's hat for a new hobby like knitting or yelling at clouds. Spoiler, Karen didn't get tired. She got bold. And on September 15th, she didn't just cross the line. She took a running leap over it, stole my boats, and declared herself the bay's self-appointed admiral. The day started like any other. A perfect, postcard-worthy morning with calm waters, a light breeze, and the kind of sunshine that makes tourists whip out their wallets. I arrived at the Marina at 8 a.m., sipping coffee strong enough to wake a coma patient, and ran through my usual checks. 3 boats were booked for the morning. A pontoon for the Williams family from Ohio. A fishing rig for 2 college buddies hyped to catch something other than a hangover. And my zippy little speedboat for a couple celebrating their anniversary with a romantic cruise. Everything was in order. Life jackets, fire extinguishers, fuel levels, the works. I was even starting to think I might get through a day without Karen's clipboard making a cameo. Then, at 11 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mr. Williams, sounding like he'd just stumbled into a fever dream. "Jake," he said, "there's a woman here claiming she's from the Coast Guard. She says she needs to inspect our boat." I froze, coffee cup halfway to my mouth. "Where are you?" "Anchored about a quarter mile from the marina." She pulled up in another boat, showed a badge, and said there's been a complaint about us. "Did she give you any ID?" "Like real ID. She's got a badge and a uniform. Looks legit. She's already on our boat, checking life jackets and asking about our navigation gear." My stomach did a somersault. "Mr. Williams, don't let her do anything else. That's not Coast Guard. That's Karen." "Karen? The lady with the hat?" "Yeah. Sit tight. I'm coming." I grabbed my keys, jumped into my personal boat, a beat-up skiff I affectionately called the Sea Potato, and gunned it toward their location. The bay was sparkling, seagulls wheeling overhead, but my heart was pounding like I was chasing a pirate ship. I spotted the Williams pontoon in the distance, and there she was, Karen, decked out in what looked like a Coast Guard uniform straight from a costume shop, rummaging through their safety gear like she was auditing Noah's Arkansas. Her captain's hat gleamed in the sun, and she was barking orders like she'd just been promoted to fleet admiral. "Karen," I shouted, pulling alongside the pontoon. "What the hell are you doing?" She looked up, cool as a cucumber, holding a life jacket like it was evidence in a murder trial. "Conducting a routine safety inspection, Jake. These folks were operating a vessel in flagrant violation of maritime standards. You're not Coast Guard," I yelled, my voice echoing across the water. The Williams family, mom, dad, and 2 wide-eyed kids, stared at us like they'd stumbled into a live-action soap opera. "I'm a certified marine safety inspector," Karen replied, flashing that cereal box badge with her name in Comic Sans. "I have authority to inspect any vessel in these waters." Mrs. Williams, clutching a cooler like a shield, piped up. "Is she Coast Guard or not?" "She's not," I said. "She's a neighbor who's been harassing my customers for months with her fake safety audits." Karen's face turned the color of a lobster in a pot. "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm protecting the public from your negligence. This vessel has improperly stored life jackets, an expired fire extinguisher, and no emergency radio." "It's a pontoon boat, Karen," I snapped. "They're fishing, not crossing the Atlantic. Safety regulations apply to all vessels," she shot back, pointing at me like I'd personally offended the ocean. That's when I noticed it. The boat she'd arrived in wasn't some random dinghy. It was my fishing boat, the one rented to the college buddies. My jaw dropped so fast it nearly hit the water. "Karen," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "where did you get that boat?" "I requisitioned it for official use," she said, like she was borrowing a stapler. "You stole it." "I borrowed it for maritime safety purposes." "Where are my other customers?" She waved a hand, dismissing me like I was an annoying deckhand. Those young men were clearly unqualified. "I sent them back to shore for their own safety." "You sent them back?" "I informed them the waters were too dangerous for novice boaters and recommended a safety course." I glanced across the bay and spotted my speedboat in the distance, the anniversary couple hightailing it back to the marina like they'd just seen Jaws. Karen had apparently requisitioned that one too, probably after lecturing them about their inadequate maritime credentials. 3 of my boats gone. My blood pressure was somewhere in the stratosphere, and I was one step away from swimming over and dragging her back to shore myself. Karen, I said, gripping the wheel of the sea potato so hard my knuckles turned white. You need to return that boat. Now. I'll return it when I've completed my inspections, she said, turning back to the Williams life jackets. You've stolen 3 of my boats. I've requisitioned them for public safety. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just unhinged. She'd built an entire fantasy world where she was the Bay's maritime savior. The fake uniform, the badge, the clipboard. She genuinely believed she was the law out here. It was like watching someone cosplay as a federal officer with the confidence of a 5-star general. The Williams family looked at me, pleading for rescue, while Karen started measuring their anchor line with a ruler she'd pulled from who knows where. Karen, I tried again, come back to shore. This is over. I have other vessels to inspect, she said, gesturing to the half-dozen boats bobbing nearby. Their occupants probably wondering why a middle-aged woman in a fake uniform was playing water cop. I looked at the Williams family, who were now filming the whole thing on their phones, probably for TikTok. Folks, I said, you might want to head back to the Marina. This is about to get legally interesting. Mr. Williams nodded, looking equal parts confused and entertained. Is she going to jail? Let's just say she's about to meet the real Coast Guard, I replied, pulling out my phone. Karen was still lecturing about flare gun protocols, oblivious to the storm brewing. I dialed the Coast Guard's number, my finger hovering over the call button. This wasn't just about saving my business anymore. It was about stopping a one-woman maritime dictatorship before she turned our sleepy bay into her personal fiefdom. The line was about to be drawn, and Karen was about to learn what happens when you play admiral in someone else's ocean. If you told me a year ago that I, Jake, a guy who just wanted to rent pontoon boats to tourists in a sleepy coastal town, would be calling the actual Coast Guard to deal with a middle-aged woman playing pirate in my fishing rig, I'd have laughed you off the dock. But on September 15th, as Karen Pemberton strutted around my stolen boat in a fake Coast Guard uniform, waving her cereal box badge like it was a royal decree, I was past laughing. I was in full-on survival mode, clutching my phone like a lifeline while the Williams family watched from their pontoon, filming what was about to become the Bay's most viral moment since a seagull stole a mayor's hot dog. Karen had requisitioned 3 of my boats, terrorized my customers, and declared herself the Bay's safety czar. It was time to call in the real cavalry. I dialed the Coast Guard, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. Coast Guard Station Harbor Point, answered a calm voice. Petty Officer Martinez speaking. Hi, this is Jake Thompson from Sunset Marina Rentals, I said, watching Karen lecture the Williams family on whistle usage like she was training Navy SEALs. I need to report someone impersonating a Coast Guard officer. Martinez's tone sharpened. Can you describe the situation, sir? There's a woman in a fake uniform who's stolen 3 of my rental boats. She's out here harassing tourists, claiming she's inspecting their vessels for safety violations. Did you say stole boats? Yeah, 3 of them. She's in one now, a white and blue fishing boat, about 24 feet. She's wearing what looks like a Coast Guard uniform and flashing a badge. Location: quarter-mile southwest of Harbor Point Marina. She's moving from boat to boat, acting like she's got federal authority. We're dispatching a patrol boat. Do not approach the subject. Keep her in sight and maintain your distance. Copy that, I said, hanging up and turning to the Williams family, who were now eating popcorn from their cooler like this was a matinee. Folks, you might want to head back to shore. Things are about to get cinematic. What's happening? Mr. Williams asked, his kids practically vibrating with excitement. The real Coast Guard's coming to deal with our fake admiral, I said, nodding toward Karen, who was now boarding another boat, a family of 4 who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Mrs. Williams grinned, pulling out her phone again. This is better than the aquarium tour we canceled. Karen, oblivious to the incoming storm, was in her element. She'd hopped onto the new boat with the grace of a sea lion in heels, her clipboard flapping as she lectured the family about their inadequate emergency protocols. I could hear snippets of her sermon. No flare gun, No distress signals? Do you want to be lost at sea? The dad, holding a fishing rod, looked like he was one step away from using it as a club. Karen, undeterred, was demonstrating proper life jacket buckling with the enthusiasm of a drill sergeant. Her fake badge gleamed in the sun, and her captain's hat sat at a Johnny angle, like she was starring in her own maritime propaganda film. From my skiff, the sea potato, I kept my distance, watching her flit between boats like a mosquito looking for blood. The bay was dotted with about 6 other vessels, mostly tourists on rentals, a few locals fishing, all now staring at the woman in the knockoff uniform barking orders. One guy in a kayak waved at me, mouthing, "What the hell?" I shrugged, pointing at Karen. "She's not with me," I mouthed back. The whole scene was surreal, like a community theater production of Pirates of the Caribbean gone horribly wrong. Then I heard it, the low, throaty rumble of a Coast Guard patrol boat slicing through the water at high speed. It was the real deal, big, white, bristling with official gear, and crewed by actual officers who probably didn't sign up to deal with a delusional Karen cosplaying as their boss. The boat's wake sent ripples across the bay, and every head turned, including Karen's. She lowered her binoculars, a smile spreading across her face like she thought they were her backup. "Karen," I shouted, standing up in my skiff. "Those are real Coast Guard officers." "I know," she called back, waving at the patrol boat like she was greeting old friends. "I requested assistance this morning for unsafe conditions in the bay. They're here to help with my inspections." "You requested backup?" I said, my voice cracking with disbelief. This woman had not only stolen my boats, but had the audacity to call the Coast Guard on herself? The patrol boat slowed, about 50 yards out, and a voice crackled over their loudspeaker. "This is Coast Guard Station Harbor Point to all vessels. Please maintain distance from the white and blue fishing boat. We have a law enforcement situation in progress." Karen, still clueless that she was the situation, kept waving like she was directing traffic. She was now on the family's boat, showing a terrified teenager how to blow a whistle in accordance with maritime distress protocols. The kid looked like he'd rather swim to shore than deal with her. The parents, meanwhile, were whispering to each other, probably debating whether to jump overboard or just surrender their boat to the crazy lady. "Ma'am," the loudspeaker boomed again. "This is the United States Coast Guard. Return to your vessel and prepare to be boarded." Karen paused, mid-whistle demo, and looked confused. "I'm conducting safety inspections," she shouted back. "I'm with the International Marine Safety Organization." "Ma'am, please return to your vessel immediately." "I'm almost done here," she replied, holding up her clipboard like it was a UN charter. "These people have multiple violations." I could see 2 officers on the patrol boat, both looking like they'd drawn the short straw for this call. The lead officer, a guy with a buzz cut and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much, grabbed the mic again. "Ma'am, I need you to return to your vessel and keep your hands visible." Karen's confusion was turning to irritation. "Is there a problem, officer?" she called, clutching her fake badge like it was a magic talisman. "Ma'am, are you a member of the United States Coast Guard?" "No, I'm with the International Marine Safety Organization." "That's not a real organization, ma'am." Her face froze, like a computer buffering on a bad Wi-Fi signal. "But I have a badge," she said, holding it up like it would change the officer's mind. "Ma'am, return to your vessel now." The tone had shifted from polite to, "We're not asking anymore," and even Karen seemed to sense the tide turning. She hesitated, then climbed back into my stolen fishing boat, her movements slow, like a kid caught sneaking cookies. The Williams family, still filming, leaned over their pontoon's railing, whispering bets on whether she'd get handcuffed or just lectured. "This is going on Reddit," their teenage son muttered, zooming in with his phone. I sat back in the sea potato, my heart pounding but a grin creeping onto my face. Karen had finally overplayed her hand, and the Real Coast Guard was about to give her a reality check harder than a rogue wave. The bay was a stage, and the curtain was rising on the most absurd maritime showdown our town had ever seen. All I could do was hold my breath and wait for the inevitable crash. If I, Jake, Had a dollar for every time I thought Karen Pemberton couldn't get any crazier. I'd be sipping margaritas on a yacht instead of running a boat rental business in a town where the biggest news is a seagull sandwich heist. But on that fateful September 15th, as the Coast Guard patrol boat closed in on Karen, still clutching her fake badge like it was the Holy Grail, I realized I'd underestimated her. She'd gone from Marina menace to full-blown maritime supervillain, and the Bay was now the stage for what would later be dubbed the Great Karen Takedown of 2024. With her fake uniform, stolen fishing boat, and an audience of baffled tourists, Karen was about to face the music, and I was front row with popcorn. The Coast Guard boat, a sleek white beast bristling with official gear, pulled alongside my stolen fishing rig, its engines growling like a fed-up parent. Karen stood defiantly in the boat, her captain's hat slightly askew, still waving her clipboard like it was a diplomatic immunity card. The Williams family, safe on their pontoon, were filming the whole thing, their kids whispering bets on whether Karen would go quietly or start a mutiny. I stayed in the sea potato, my trusty skiff, trying not to laugh as the real officers prepared to deal with our fake admiral. "Ma'am," boomed Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez over the loudspeaker, his voice carrying the weary authority of someone who'd rather be rescuing actual sailors. "I'm Petty Officer Rodriguez. Shut off your engine and prepare to be boarded." Karen, undeterred, adjusted her hat and called back with the confidence of a televangelist. "Officer Rodriguez, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm conducting safety inspections under the authority of the International Marine Safety Organization." Rodriguez, a stocky guy with a buzz cut and a face that screamed, "I don't get paid enough for this," exchanged a glance with his partner. "Ma'am, that organization doesn't exist." "Of course it exists," Karen snapped, holding up her badge like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I have documentation." "Ma'am, please turn off your engine." Karen hesitated, her eyes darting between Rodriguez and the badge, as if she expected it to suddenly sprout legitimacy. With a huff, she complied, the fishing boat's engine sputtering to a stop. Rodriguez climbed aboard with the caution of someone approaching a raccoon with a questionable attitude. His partner, Petty Officer Martinez, stayed on the patrol boat, watching the scene like he was taking mental notes for his memoir. "Ma'am, I need to see some identification," Rodriguez said, standing a safe distance from Karen's clipboard. She handed over her badge with a flourish, like she was presenting a Nobel Prize. "I'm Inspector Karen Pemberton, International Marine Safety Organization." Rodriguez examined the badge, holding it up to the light like it might reveal a secret hologram. His face remained impassive, but I could tell he was fighting a smirk. "Ma'am, this appears to be a toy badge, possibly from a costume shop." "It's a legitimate credential from a legitimate organization," Karen insisted, her voice hitting a pitch that could shatter glass. "I'm certified to conduct safety inspections." "Ma'am, I'm going to need your driver's license." Karen fumbled through her purse, muttering about bureaucratic incompetence, and produced her license. Rodriguez studied it, then radioed Martinez. "This is Rodriguez. Subject genuinely believes she's a marine safety inspector. Possible mental health issue or, I don't know, the world's most committed performance art." "Copy that," Martinez replied, his voice crackling over the radio. "We've got a dozen boats watching like it's the Super Bowl. Clear the area." "Negative," Rodriguez said. "Let them watch. Might teach him not to play Coast Guard." The tourists in the bay were indeed glued to the drama, their boats bobbing like floating bleachers. One guy in a kayak was eating a sandwich, narrating to his buddy like a sports commentator. The Williams kids were live streaming, their dad whispering, "This is better than Netflix." I couldn't blame them. Karen's arrest was shaping up to be the kind of spectacle you tell your grandkids about. Rodriguez turned back to Karen, his patience visibly fraying. "Mrs. Pemberton, you're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer, theft of watercraft, and interfering with maritime commerce." Karen's jaw dropped, her badge slipping from her fingers. "Arrest? I'm protecting people. These boats are death traps." "Ma'am, you stole 3 boats and harassed tourists while pretending to be Coast Guard." "I never said I was Coast Guard," she protested, clutching her clipboard like a life raft. "I'm with the International Marine Safety Organization." "That's not a real thing," Rodriguez said, his tone now a mix of exhaustion and pity. "Hands behind your back, please." "This is a mistake," Karen wailed, but she complied, her shoulders slumping as Rodriguez cuffed her. "When my supervisor hears about this, there'll be an investigation." "Ma'am, you don't have a supervisor," Rodriguez said, guiding her toward the patrol boat. "You're not a marine inspector." "I absolutely am," she insisted, her voice echoing across the water. "Who's going to enforce safety regulations? Do you know how many people die in boating accidents?" "Ma'am, you're making this worse," Rodriguez said, helping her aboard the patrol boat with the care you'd give a toddler throwing a tantrum. Martinez, watching from the helm, shook his head and muttered something about needing a vacation. Karen kept up her tirade as they secured her. "This will cause a maritime safety crisis. These people don't know the first thing about proper vessel operation." "That's our job, ma'am," Rodriguez said, sounding like he was one outburst away from retiring. "The actual Coast Guard handles that." I followed in the Sea Potato, my heart doing a weird dance between relief and surreal amusement. The woman who'd turned my summer into a bureaucratic nightmare was finally in cuffs, still ranting about flare guns and distress signals as the patrol boat pulled away. The Williams family trailed behind, their kids chanting, "Fake Coast Guard, fake Coast Guard," like it was a new playground game. As we headed back to the marina, the sun glinting off the water, I couldn't shake a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to high-five the Coast Guard for ending Karen's reign of terror. Another part felt an odd pang of pity. She'd built this insane fantasy where she was saving the bay from my dangerous pontoons, and now reality was hitting her like a rogue wave. But mostly, I was just glad my boats were coming back, even if one of them now smelled faintly of Karen's perfume and self-righteousness. The bay was calm again, but the story was far from over. Karen's arrest was about to blow up in ways I couldn't yet imagine. When you're Jake, a guy who just wants to rent boats to tourists and avoid paperwork, having your marina turned into the set of a viral true crime drama isn't exactly on the vision board. But by the time the Coast Guard hauled Karen Pemberton away in cuffs on September 15th, her fake badge glinting pathetically in the sun, I knew our sleepy coastal town was about to become a meme factory. The Great Karen Takedown of 2024 didn't just end with her arrest. It exploded into a spectacle that made my marina the hottest ticket in town, for better or worse. As I steered the Sea Potato back to the marina, the Williams family trailing behind and still filming like amateur Spielbergs, I braced for the chaos that was about to hit harder than a nor'easter. By the time we docked, the marina was a circus. News vans from Channel 7 and some podunk regional outlet were parked haphazardly, their crews setting up cameras like they were covering a presidential scandal. Tourists milled around, swapping stories about the crazy boat lady, while locals who hadn't set foot in the marina since the 90s suddenly showed up to gawk. Bob, the harbor master, was holding court near the dock, his coffee mug practically a prop as he regaled a reporter with tales of Karen's antics. "In 20 years, he told the camera, I've seen drunks, smugglers, even a guy who tried to marry a dolphin. But this woman? She built her own little Coast Guard, fake badge and all. It's like she thought she was saving the bay from pontoon Armageddon." The story went viral faster than a cat video. By evening, "Local woman arrests herself by impersonating Coast Guard" was trending on X, with a blurry video of Karen's arrest, shot by the Williams' teenage son, racking up millions of views. The comments were a goldmine. "Is this what happens when you give a Karen a captain's hat? And this lady's one whistle away from starting her own navy." Someone even made a meme of Karen's badge with the caption, "International Marine Safety Organization, accepting applications in Comic Sans." I'd have laughed if I weren't so busy fielding calls from reporters, customers, and my mom, who wanted to know why I hadn't told her I was fighting crime on the high seas. The Coast Guard, bless their waterlogged hearts, handled it like pros. At a press conference that night, Petty Officer Rodriguez stood in front of a podium, looking like he'd rather be scrubbing barnacles. The subject believed she had authority to conduct safety inspections, he said, his voice flat, but his eyes screaming for a vacation. While this appears to be a mental health issue rather than a criminal enterprise, she's facing serious charges: impersonating a federal officer, theft of watercraft, and interfering with maritime commerce. When a reporter asked if Karen was dangerous, Rodriguez deadpanned, "She's more dangerous to herself than anyone else." But stealing boats isn't exactly a victimless hobby. I became an unwilling celebrity in the aftermath. The FBI wanted to interview me about Karen's months-long harassment campaign, and I spent hours in a stuffy office with Agent Morrison, a guy who looked like he'd been born in a suit. "So," he said, flipping through a file, "she started with noise complaints and escalated to stealing your boats?" "Yup," I said, sipping bad government coffee. "It went from, 'Your boats are too loud,' to, 'I'm the bay's safety sheriff,' in about 3 months. She had a clipboard, a fake badge, and a surveillance setup that would have made the NSA jealous." "Any signs of mental illness before this?" "I'm no shrink, but she went from annoying to full-on Captain Ahab with a vendetta against my pontoons. The fake uniform was a nice touch, though. Really sold the delusion." The psych evaluation later confirmed what we all suspected. Karen was suffering from grandiose delusions with paranoid features, triggered by her messy divorce and too much time in her waterfront McMansion. Dr. Sarah Chun, the court-appointed shrink, explained it at the trial. Ms. Pemberton constructed a fantasy where she was protecting the community from maritime disasters. In her mind, she wasn't breaking laws, she was enforcing them. It was almost sad, like watching someone build a sandcastle and then get swept away by their own tide. The trial was a media circus that could have sold out a stadium. Karen's lawyer, a nervous guy who looked like he regretted taking the case, argued she was mentally incompetent, citing her belief in the International Marine Safety Organization as evidence of her break from reality. The prosecution countered that delusion didn't excuse stealing boats or impersonating a federal officer. I testified for a grueling 2 hours, detailing Karen's campaign of noise complaints, surveillance, and customer harassment. She genuinely thought she was saving lives, I told the jury, but she was also tanking my business and scaring tourists out of their flip-flops. The jury took less than 2 hours to deliver a verdict: not guilty by reason of insanity. Karen was committed to a psychiatric facility for treatment instead of prison, which felt like the right call. Jail wouldn't have fixed her, and I wasn't out for blood, just my boats back in some peace. As I left the courtroom, dodging reporters who wanted my hero story, I caught a glimpse of Karen being led away. Her captain's hat was gone, her clipboard confiscated, and for the first time, she looked small, like a kid who'd been told Santa wasn't real. Here's the kicker: the whole fiasco was a twisted blessing for my business. The viral video turned Sunset Marina Rentals into a tourist magnet. People came from across the state to rent boats from the guy who took down the fake Coast Guard lady. My bookings doubled, and I had to hire extra staff to handle the crowds. "Is it true she stole 3 boats?" a guy from Michigan asked, signing his rental agreement. "She commandeered them for official use," I said, quoting Karen with a grin. "Very thorough, Inspector." The story grew legs, morphing into local legend. By the time it hit late-night talk shows, Karen was the woman who started her own Coast Guard, and I was the boat guy who fought a maritime vigilante. It was absurd, but it paid the bills. As I locked up the marina one night, the bay shimmering under a full moon, I couldn't help but wonder what Karen was doing in her psych ward. Hopefully getting the help she needed. But knowing her, she was probably trying to organize a safety audit of the hospital cafeteria. The saga was over, but the ripples were just starting to spread, and I had a feeling this wasn't the last I'd hear of Karen's nautical dreams. You'd think that after Karen Pemberton's spectacular arrest for playing Coast Guard in my stolen boats, life at Sunset Marina Rentals would settle back into the sleepy rhythm of a coastal town where the biggest drama is a seagull's lunch heist. I'm Jake, the guy who just wanted to rent pontoons to tourists, not star in a viral saga that turned my marina into the epicenter of a Reddit-fueled legend. But as the dust settled, or rather, the sea spray cleared, I learned that Karen's maritime meltdown wasn't just a one-off disaster. It was the gift that kept on giving, like a jellyfish sting you don't notice until you're screaming. The aftermath of her arrest reshaped my business, my sanity, and believe it or not, the town's entire vibe. And just when I thought I'd seen the last of her, Karen had one final surprise up her captain's hat. The months following the great Karen takedown of 2024 were a whirlwind. My Marina went from a quiet operation to a full-blown tourist trap. People weren't just renting boats to fish or cruise. They were coming to gawk at the place where the fake Coast Guard lady got busted. I leaned into it because why not? I slapped a new sign on the office, Sunset Marina Rentals, where the boats are real and the drama's unreal. I even printed t-shirts with Karen's infamous quote. I requisitioned them for official use, which sold out faster than ice cream on the 4th of July. Tourists posed for selfies with my fishing boat, the one Karen commandeered, like it was the Mona Lisa. One guy from Texas offered to buy it as a piece of maritime history. I told him it wasn't for sale, but I threw in a free hat for his enthusiasm. The viral fame brought cash, but it also brought chaos. Reporters kept calling, wanting my hero's journey for clickbait articles. How does it feel to take down a maritime vigilante? One asked, like I'd single-handedly foiled a pirate invasion. Mostly tired, I said, dodging their follow-ups. My inbox was flooded with interview requests, podcast invites, and one bizarre offer to star in a low-budget docudrama called Karen of the High Seas. I passed, but I did let a local brewery name a beer after me. Jake's Justice IPA, a hoppy number with a tagline about sinking bad vibes. It wasn't half bad. Meanwhile, Karen's story took on a life of its own. X was a circus of memes, photoshopped images of her in a pirate hat, fake wanted posters for Captain Karen, and a viral thread titled AITA for thinking I'm the Coast Guard that got 50,000 upvotes. The Williams family, whose pontoon Karen had boarded, became minor celebrities, their video racking up views on every platform. Their teenage son started a TikTok account dedicated to Karen updates, complete with dramatic reenactments. I followed it for a week before deciding I needed less Karen in my life, not more. But what about Karen herself? After her not guilty by reason of insanity verdict, she was tucked away in a psychiatric facility upstate, where I hoped she was getting the help she needed. The psych report painted a sad picture. Her divorce had left her unmoored, and moving to our town with too much money and time had turned her into a one-woman crusade against imaginary maritime disasters. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. It's hard to stay sympathetic when someone spent months trying to sink your livelihood with a clipboard and a fake badge. Still, I figured she was out of my hair, probably busy lecturing her fellow patients about proper hospital bed safety protocols. Life at the Marina settled into a new normal. Bookings were up, my staff was swamped, and I was starting to think about expanding. Maybe adding a second speedboat or a fancy catamaran for the Instagram crowd. Bob, the harbor master, became my unofficial PR manager, regaling tourists with exaggerated tales of Karen's reign of terror. She had a whole war room, he'd say, waving his coffee mug. Charts, binoculars, the works. Thought she was saving us from Jake's pontoons. The locals ate it up, and I didn't mind. The more they talked, the more boats I rented. Then, about 6 months after the arrest, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real, honest-to-God letter, postmarked from the psychiatric facility. The handwriting was neat, almost too neat, and the envelope smelled faintly of lavender. My stomach did a flip as I opened it, half expecting a manifesto about maritime justice. Instead, it was from Karen. No clipboard, no badge, just a single page of surprisingly lucid prose. Dear Jake, it began, I owe you an apology. My behavior last summer was misguided. I believed I was protecting the community, but I see now that I caused harm, especially to you and your business. The doctors here have helped me understand my actions, and I'm working on getting better. I hope you can forgive me. Sincerely, Karen Pemberton. I read it 3 times, waiting for the catch. Was this a trick? A setup for her next crusade? But the words felt genuine, stripped of the pompous tone she'd used on the bay. I showed it to Bob, who raised an eyebrow. Think she's cured? Or is she just planning her comeback as hospital safety inspector? He asked, smirking. Dunno, I said, folding the letter. But I'm not framing it. I didn't write back. What do you say to someone who turned your summer into a nautical nightmare? No hard feelings. Thanks for the viral fame. I tucked the letter in a drawer and moved on, figuring that was the last I'd hear from her. But this is Karen we're talking about, and she wasn't done leaving her mark. A month later, I was at the Marina, teaching a new hire how to check fuel lines, when a customer, a nervous-looking guy in his 20s, approached. Hey, you're Jake, right? The boat guy from the Karen thing. Yup, I said, bracing for another selfie request. I was at this community fair upstate last week, he said, and there was this booth selling handmade safety whistles. The woman running it looked familiar. She had a sign that said, Support Maritime Safety Awareness. My blood ran cold. What did she look like? Middle-aged, super intense. Kept talking about proper distress signals. Had a captain's hat on the table, like a display piece. I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh you let out when you realize the universe has a sick sense of humor. Karen was back, or at least, a version of her was. Not stealing boats, not impersonating officers, but still out there, peddling her maritime obsession in a slightly less illegal way. I thanked the guy, handed him a free t-shirt, and went back to work, shaking my head. Some people change, but Karen? She was like a barnacle, stuck to her cause, no matter how crazy. As I locked up that night, the bay calm and the stars winking overhead, I couldn't help but smirk. Karen's saga had turned my life upside down, but it also made me the luckiest boat rental guy in the country. My business was thriving, my story was legend, and somewhere out there, Karen was probably still dreaming of a world where every boater had a flare gun and a whistle. Here's to hoping she stays on dry land. But if she ever comes back, I've got the Coast Guard on speed dial and a new security camera trained on the dock, just in case. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.